Your ultimate dilemma in fantasy football is weighing risk versus reward. And the quicker you solve this problem, the better your fantasy teams will be. And I'm here to help with that. Here are 5 risky players that your friends think are safe. Starting with Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen, who over the last 3 seasons has seen his efficiency drop every year. Last year, he was 35th in the league, which isn't awful, but for a guy like Keenan Allen, who has been top 10 year after year in route running, this starts to be a concern. And this is a normal trend for receivers as they approach their 30s. And this past April, Allen turned 30. Now, here's why this is a concern. 30-year-old wide receivers see an average efficiency drop of an additional 25%, which means that Allen's number of being around 35th in the league right here would push towards being 50th in the league in wide receiver efficiency. And while being 35th last year, he was the 11th overall wide receiver. But if he was to approach 50th, the average receiver in that range finishes 27th in fantasy points, which is important to note because right now Allen is going as a top 12 wide receiver, and it is very rare to see after 3 straight years of efficiency drops it go the other way in your older years. And not to mention, last year in the first year of the new offense under offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, Mike Williams was the featured X receiver, and that resulted in Mike Williams leading the team in deep targets and the most targets inside the 10-yard line. But that's not all, because last year Keenan Allen hit a career low in yards after the catch. He's known for getting open with his route running and doing things after the catch. 32%. That is the drop that he saw last year, by far the worst of his career. And that's because last year Keenan Allen saw a career low 1.7 yards after the catch per target. This was 32% lower than any other year. This guy has been known for route running, getting open, and doing things after the catch, and last year were career lows by a wide margin in both. This is a concern. And there are similar concerns for this next top 15 pick. And that man's name is DAndre Swift, who I love as a talent, but we have to break down why he's a concern, and it mainly starts with the fact that right now Swift goes as a top 8 running back, which translates to often being taken in the first round of drafts. He's a fantastic talent, but he's not worth that first round pick, and here's why. You probably already know that DAndre Swift is an elite receiver. He was top 5 in receptions and receiving yards last year, and that's with missing time. On a per game basic, he was top 1 or top 2 in most of these categories. Very few backs in the NFL are as good as Swift here, but on the ground last year, he was outside the top 50 running backs in rushing efficiency. And he did play behind one of the better offensive lines until some injuries came on in the middle to later part of the year, but even then, backup Jamal Williams was still more efficient on the ground than Swift. And in those 11 games that they played together last year, Jamal Williams averaged over 13 opportunities per game, which led all backup running backs. Detroit clearly trusts Williams, who only has 1 career fumble and is a well above average pass blocker, but it doesn't stop here. And that's because Swift last year saw just 30% of his team's red zone opportunities. And if you see where he ranks right now, 34th amongst running backs last year, it's around Darrell Williams, Ramondre Stevenson, Latavius Murray, Devonta Freeman. These are not great backs to be around given where he's going in fantasy drafts. And for comparison reasons, Jamal Williams' backup saw 24 red zone touches last year, which were just 3 less than the starter, the top 15 pick, DAndre Swift. And one more thing, 37% of Swift's receptions last year came in the 4th quarter when the Lions were trailing. But now the Lions' season win total is at 6.5. Last year at this time, it was at 2.5. That's a 160% increase in their win total. So another way to think about this is if Detroit improves, Swift's receptions may actually drop in 2022. And this top 10 quarterback may also see a drop in production. And that man's name is Joe Burrow, who was the number 10 overall fantasy quarterback last year, and right now he currently goes in drafts as the 7th overall quarterback. But fellas, here's why this is too early. Let's start by saying you shouldn't get it twisted. Burrow was elite last year in real life. His 7.9 yards per attempt were the 4th most since 2012, and his 8.9 true yards per attempt were the most we have seen in the last 20 years. And not only that, here's another schmack for you. In terms of completion percentage since 2010, only Drew Brees was more accurate than Burrow last year. So here's another way to look at this. Despite the historic efficiency, Joe Burrow barely cracked the top 10 in fantasy scoring last year. And this was due to his league average passing volume. His 32.5 attempts per game were 15th in the NFL. And the Bengals were 20th in passing plays per game. They pass about 59% of the time, which yes, was around or below league average. And here's where things get complicated. Burrow was historically efficient last year, and he was already top 10 in passing TDs and top 10, borderline top 5, threw for over 4,600 passing yards. So to pay off his current price as a top 7 quarterback in drafts, he would have to continue this historic efficiency while also increasing his passing volume, which is possible but unlikely. Now let me tell you why this top 10 tight end is also a risk. And that fella's name is Dawson Knox, who goes as the 9th tight end in drafts right now, which is actually 5 draft slots ahead of Zach Ertz, even though Ertz last year was number 4 in tight end efficiency. And Dawson Knox was much worse than that. He ranked 22nd in tight end efficiency, yards per route run, and he was 28th at earning targets amongst amongst tight ends last year. There's only 32 starting tight ends in the league. He was 28th at generating targets. But this isn't the only issue. Let me explain. Since entering the league, Josh Allen targets tight ends at an 11% clip. And last year, his 13% rate at targeting tight ends, as you can see on the screen, was tied for the lowest in the NFL. Now, not only that, but this number right here of 7% is the amount of plays ran last year without a tight end on the field for the Bills. And that was the second lowest rate, only behind the Cardinals in the NFL. And believe it or not, the bad news doesn't stop here. And that's because inefficiency can be cured at least somewhat when you have a lot of volume. But Dawson Knox ranked outside the top 20 tight ends last year in targets per game with just 4.7. So you might be wondering, how in the heck did this guy finish top 10 amongst tight ends last year? Well, let's discuss. It was one simple way, and that was touchdowns. He had 9, but more so his touchdown rate of 18.4% was one of the highest we have seen in a decade for a tight end. 33% of his points came off of touchdowns last year. If he just saw an average touchdown rate, he would have finished outside the top 15 tight ends pretty easily. Now, I am very low on Dawson Knox. I have him as my 142nd player in my top 200, but he goes as the 102nd. I'm 40 spots below the consensus here. Now, if you'd like to see this complete top 200, my tiers, my wants and avoids list, and a whole lot more, including a $20 Amazon gift card, just click the link in the description and follow the 2 simple steps to acquire my supreme cheat sheet. And if for some reason you don't like the sheet, I'll refund your minimum deposit to get it, which is $10, and you can keep the $20 gift card. If you want to secure that cheat sheet and smack around your friends this year, click the link in the description to learn more. All right, so Dawson Knox wasn't the only player last year to benefit from touchdowns. And that's because Buccaneers wide receiver Mike Evans, one of the most consistent guys of all time, he has now scored 27 touchdowns in 2 seasons with Tom Brady, 2 times more than any other Bucs player. However, Evans is currently taken as the wide receiver 7, a top 15 overall pick in fantasy drafts, and often goes in the first round. This means he has to produce similar numbers to last year to be worth it. But here's the thing, his underlying metrics are concerning. Evans has now seen his efficiency drop in 3 straight seasons, and last year he ranked 69th amongst all wide receivers at earning targets. His target rate was just 19.2%. He ended up finishing 10th amongst wide receivers, but it took 14 touchdowns to get there. Now check this out, his touchdown rate of 18.7%, and if you look at the last 2 years of 19.3%, is the highest we have seen in a decade. And now we've looked at this beautiful study by Fantasy Data before. The top 12 wide receivers over the last decade or so have averaged a 6.4% touchdown rate, meaning that Evans was about triple this last year. He's a clear outlier. And here's why this makes him a risky pick. It is extremely rare to see a player's efficiency bounce back once it drops this low, especially in his older years. So even if Evans was to score 12 plus touchdowns for a 3rd straight season, he would still finish outside the top 10 wide receivers even at these efficiency levels. And I know what you're saying, but Chris Godwin is gone and Antonio Brown is gone and Rob Gronkowski retired. It's all about earning targets, the efficiency. Even if those guys are gone, he's not going to get the ball thrown his way if he's not separating, earning targets, and getting yards after the catch. That is independent of what his competition is. So Evans is clearly an elite talent, one of the most stable wide receivers we have ever seen, but he's just not worth a top 15 pick in this year's draft. So in the past, these 5 players have been safe, but based on where they go in drafts right now, they're pretty risky. But your friends don't know that, and they don't know the fantasy cheat codes. If you want to know the fantasy cheat codes and the players that possess them for this year, then check out this video right here. And that video might be one of the most important that you watch this entire off season. By the way, if you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button.